Hello, my name is Greta and this is Jen, and we are the youth representatives for IBVM NGO working in partnership with the Congregation of Jesus with the United Nations here in New York. We've been here in New York for 2 months now, working with many NGO committees and experiencing the inner workings of the UN system. Today, we will be sharing with you what the UN is, how it works, and how well it works, based upon our reading of 2 books, Untold by Ian Williams
and An Insider's Guide to the UN by Linda Fasulo.
Ian Williams' book is a provocative, engaging exploration of the United Nations, exploring its history and how it functions. He gives an honest critique and explanation of this controversial institution. It describes how the organisation is supposed to work, how it actually behaves, and why there is a difference. Untold lets its readers in on the quirks and mysteries of the international diplomacy and global decision-making.
Similarly, Linda Fasulo does a fantastic job of reviewing the United Nations principal organs, committees, programs, and funds, and how they all function together, while simultaneously providing interesting insight from former UN staff and representatives. For me, it was really these details that made An Insider's Guide to the UN an interesting and engaging read. For a little bit of history about the United Nations.
So, the UN is an international institution where states come together aiming to create a common global interest of peace. It is the only platform where all the 193 member states involved can come together to discuss issues relating to peace, security, and humanitarian affairs. The UN is involved in almost every aspect of life, but at its core it is political. It's about keeping the peace as reflected in the UN Charter, and it works towards 3 pillars: peace and security, human rights, and development. The UN and its agencies do critical work in combating world conflict, and while it doesn't always get it right, we will be worse off without it. So a little bit of history about the UN. This institution was established in 1945 with the purpose to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war after the outcomes of World War II. It works through diplomacy, sanctions, and joint military action, and it is led by the Secretary General. The Secretary General is a very vague job description, leaving much room for interpretation by the appointed. Described as Chief Administrative Officer, World Moderator, and an impossible job, this position has seen its 9 Secretary Generals to date adapt the role to their own style and lead the organisation in their own way.
This is something that Linda Fasulo really talks about in her book. She gives examples of Kofi Annan's very active form of leadership in contrast to Ban Ki-moon's more subtle diplomacy, who was very careful to only promise what he could deliver.
The United Nations is made up of 6 principal organs, as well as programs and funds, specialized agencies such as the World Health Organization and International Monetary Fund, and thousands of non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. In the next few minutes, we are going to provide a brief overview of the principal organs and how they operate together. All are based in New York City, with the exception of the International Court of Justice, which is based in The Hague, Netherlands.
The first of these is the General Assembly. The General Assembly is the main deliberative, policy-making and representative organ of the United Nations, where member states discuss and work together on a wide array of international issues relating to development, peace, security and international law. It runs from September through to December for the general debate, where member states come together to discuss, debate and work on these issues together, to which they then vote on through resolutions. The General Assembly is split up into 6 committees, where each has a specific focus. The first committee, which deals with disarmament and international security. The second committee, which focuses on economic and financial issues. The third committee, which is social, humanitarian and cultural. The fourth committee is special, political and decolonisation. The fifth committee is administrative and budgetary. And the last 6th committee is for legal.
Next, we have the Secretariat. The Secretariat is essentially an international bureau consisting of approximately 9,000 staff from 160 countries. These staff are responsible solely to the United Nations and operate under the Secretary General. Their headquarters are located in the Tall Glass Building in New York City. However, there are also offices in Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. The Security Council can be thought of as the enforcer of the United Nations. It is the only principal organ whose resolutions are binding. As a side note, resolutions are the UN equivalent of laws, except signatories are not legally bound. There are 15 members of the Security Council, 5 permanent and an additional 10 who are elected by the General Assembly and serve 2-year terms. The 5 permanent members are the United States, the Russian Federation, France, China, and the United Kingdom. This group holds a special weight in the Council, as each permanent member has the power to veto a resolution if they choose. The Security Council is responsible for making the world a safer place by preventing and responding to armed conflict between and within nations, as well as terrorism, the threat of weapons of mass destruction, peacekeeping missions, and criminal tribunals. The Trusteeship Council is made up of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council and is tasked with the primary responsibility of aiding decolonization. Following the independence of Palau, the Council formally suspended operations in 1994 and is no longer required to meet annually, but by request or need only. Next is the International Court of Justice, or World Court. The International Court of Justice is made up of 15 judges serving 9-year terms, elected by the General Assembly and Security Council. It is concerned with states, not individuals, and hears all kinds of legal cases, including but in no way limited to human rights cases. Additionally, it offers legal advice at the request of international organizations. Finally, we have the Economic and Social Council, or Ecosoc. Ecosoc is composed of 54 members elected by the General Assembly, each serving 3-year terms. Ecosoc was created as a deliberative body rather than an operational body, to help other parts of the UN system examine and shape their programs. Its mandate is to function as a forum for discussing international social, economic, and humanitarian issues, as well as coordinate the work of UN bodies and agencies concerned with these issues. Although it is often criticized for its lack of focus, Ecosoc serves an important function as the intermediary between the General Assembly and non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. To briefly talk about NGOs, NGOs are not actual parts of the UN system. However, they have become important in helping implement UN efforts and programs, such as those related to human rights, literacy, healthcare, and economic development. They can serve as technical experts, advisors, and consultants to governments and the Secretariat, as well as support UN plans of actions, programs, and declarations. By gaining consultative status with Ecosoc, NGO representatives can attend meetings, events, participate in projects, and submit reports to Ecosoc. This is where IBVM fits into the United Nations.
Now that you have a better idea of how the UN is structured, it's easier to understand where other aspects of its work come into play. These are things like peacekeeping mission, coordination of humanitarian affairs, and climate action.
So in his book, William evaluates these systems and how effective they have proven. He describes successful missions initiated by the UN, such as the implementation of conventions that led to the removal of more than 46 million landmines throughout the world, as well as the banning of nuclear weapon development. Though he also notes unsuccessful missions, such as its involvement in a number of conflict situations in Egypt and the Iran-Iraq war during the 1980s that in many ways made things worse.
Adding to Greta's words, Fasulo acknowledges the failures, administrative waffling, and diplomatic theatrics that have brought criticism to the UN over the years. However, she also highlights its worth in our world. If you've ever traveled on an international airline, placed a phone call overseas, or been thankful for an accurate weather report, you've been serviced either directly or indirectly by the United Nations.
So to the question of if it is a worthwhile organisation, Williams makes it clear that there are different levels of enthusiasm and cynicism towards the UN. While it isn't a perfect system, and it has experienced its fair share of failures, the UN invented peacekeeping and has built an international platform for advancing development and human rights.
In many ways, the United Nations is like the world's conscience, and while it may not always be strong enough to make real change, its presence is invaluable in more ways than one. We hope that you've enjoyed our video, and thank you for watching.